The Atlanta Story is a podcast highlighting Atlanta's most interesting creators, entrepreneurs, and builders. I'm JC Cadet with Atlanta Ventures and co-producer alongside Jon Birdsong. In today's episode, Jon sits down with Brian McGowen, president of Centennial Yards. Born in the Bronx, raised in New Jersey, and educated in California, Brian has been bi-coastal for the majority of his life. His career has spanned between public and private sectors, dating back to his time in California, to DC, and culminating in Atlanta. Now he's leading Centennial Yards, which is an 8 million square foot mixed-use development preparing to bring a gravitational force of energy, including dining, entertainment, housing, and office to the Gulch. Topics in today's interview include lessons learned while working with the Governator, Arnold Scwartzenegger, what makes a successful private-public partnership, Centennial Yards' progress and origin story, and much more. We hope you enjoy the show and subscribe to The Atlanta Story.
Brian McGowen, welcome to the Atlanta Story podcast. It's good to see you.
Yeah, thank you, Jon. It's been a few years.
It has been.
I apologize in the last 2 years since I've been here. I haven't reached out, but this is perfect.
Oh, all good.
And this is my neighborhood too, so yes. I live not far away, so it was easy to get here.
I love that. We were talking as you were coming up the elevator, but born in the Bronx, Tom's River, and and want to get to a lot of your career and of course Centennial Yards, but first tell us, what was it like growing up in the Bronx? You've got several years, East Coast, West Coast.
So I was born in the Bronx, actually first generation American. So my mother is an immigrant from Ireland. Still have a ton of family in Ireland, nice. Cousins and aunts and uncles, and which I'm connected to.
You get over there once or twice a year?
At least once a year.
Nice.
Excuse me. And then we moved to New Jersey, and I went to high school in Toms River, New Jersey, and then the whole family picked up and moved to Palm Springs, California. So when I was right after I graduated high school, I moved to Southern California, which you can imagine was like culture shock for a New Jersey kid landing in Palm Desert, California. It was like landing on Mars in a way, and ended up in California for 20 years after that.
You've had a career in the public-private partnerships, where you've got Invest Atlanta to Centennial Yards, and help us understand what makes a good public-private partnership that lasts, that has benefits on both sides.
Yeah. So my career path was in economic development and economic growth. So my first job out of college, I worked for the city of Palm Springs, California. Sonny Bono was our former mayor and congressman at the time, which was great. And my job was to promote that city, to create jobs and diversify its economy away from just tourism, right? So you're also working a lot with developers in real estate and the private sector, and you're trying to grow companies and entrepreneurism. And, we actually, when I was one of the first things I worked on was a one-stop permitting center. So to make it easy for businesses to get permits through City Hall.
Very important, even in Atlanta today.
And business retention and expansion, going on interviewing businesses and making sure they have what they need to be successful in the city, et cetera. All of that really taught me that there's really a language barrier between the private sector and the public sector in a lot of ways, right? So, I'd have a company call and complain, I'm trying to open a business, I can't get a permit, can you help me get a permit? And I go over to the planning department and I try to find out what the problem was, and planning department's blaming the business, and the business is blaming the planning department. I usually would just get everybody in the room. And sure enough, it's 90% of the time, it's a miscommunication about something, And I think at the end of the day, you have, good intentioned government people doing their job, but not understanding that the person on the other side of the counter is not getting paid a salary. Every minute that they're there, they're not getting paid. And so that was like a revelation to me that's a real need, that to make sure that we have people in society that can speak the language of both and bring people together to solve problems. Because as you and I both know, if that's not happening, your economy is not going to grow. That's not happening, you're not going to be creating jobs. So you have to get the public sector and the private sector on the same page, working together. It's like, if you think about it, everything's a public-private partnership.
Sure.
You know? And the businesses that you've done, you've had to get permitting, you've been regulated, all those things. So if that's not working well, you're not going to grow your economy.
And you worked in California under Governor Scwartzenegger.
Yes. Yeah.
Transition to President Obama's administration.
Yeah.
Walk us through those chapters in your career.
Yeah.
Was that more public sector?
Yeah.
More private integration?
Yeah. So So my bachelor's degree is in political science.
Yeah.
And then
in California, right?
In California, University of California, Riverside. And then I got my master's degree in politics, economics, and business. Nice. So very interesting that it was like made for me. When I saw that degree, I'm like, that's me. That's what I need to do. That's where I want to be in between the public and private sector, right?
And there were two, right? There were two. Did I read that there were two different degrees, a master's, or
no? What it was it was three different schools within the Claremont Graduate University, and the business of the MAPEB, the politics, economics, and business. The B was business. All of those courses were in the Peter Drucker School of Management.
Got it.
So what was cool about that was I'm sitting in a class with MBA students, and I'm sitting in a class with policy students, and I'm sitting in a class with economics students, and everybody thinks differently. And so it was a really great training for what I ended up, what I was doing and what I ended up continuing to do. Yeah. But I had, while I was working for another city, I had done a couple of trade missions to China. At that time, China was growing, and everybody wanted to go to China. And
this is 2008, right?
Yeah,
like
yeah, exactly. Yeah, even earlier.
Okay.
Yeah, and I had done a trade mission to China for the city I was working in, and it was successful. And the New York Times wrote an article about it, actually, and it was "Trade Missions That Do More Than Just See the Great Wall" was the title of the article in the New York Times.
Sure.
About this little city in California doing trade missions to China. And it was because I would do real trade missions, not junkets. It's like I would tell people, if you want to see the Great Wall of China, don't come with me, because we got to do business when we're there. And that was successful. And then Arnold was elected, and I was still working for the city of Ontario, California. And the governor wanted to do a trade mission to China. So I got a call from someone in the governor's office saying, "Can you help?" And so I went to my boss, the city manager at the time, said, "Governor's office wants to borrow me to help on this trade mission." And of course they said yes. And so that's how I ended up meeting Governor Scwartzenegger. And so I did that trade mission, and it was successful. And then I can't remember how many months later, within a year, I get a call from the governor asking if I would come work for him. So that's how I ended up kind of transitioning to the Scwarzenegger administration, working for the Governator.
Governator. Was he any interesting stories or tidbits working for?
Oh, so many.
Give us one, or if not two.
Working for Arnold was fascinating because, first of all, I think people underestimate him. I mean, this is a super successful human being, right? You know, everything from as an immigrant, he came here and he started his own business, supplements, and then became a championship bodybuilder. Then he became a movie star. Then he became governor of the sixth largest economy in the world.
Yep.
So he was just a fascinating human being just to watch operate and be around. And
when he first started running, I remember it was almost a joke, and then people were like, "No, he's
the real deal."
Yeah, he's actually really good.
And, the state of California was having a big budget deficit issues at the time. We had like a $25 billion budget hole. And I think he did an amazing job managing the state of California through that period. But he was a lot of fun to be around if you worked for him.
Yes.
If you were on the other side of the negotiating table, it wasn't so good. He was a ruthless negotiator. Like he just had a way of kind of making you feel less about yourself if you were negotiating against him. Like he just has this way of like getting into your head,
Yeah.
But if you worked for him, it was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Like,
and developed a good culture. Or go ahead.
one of the funniest things was it was a lesson in like the craziness of celebrity and how people react to celebrities. But everywhere we would go, even when I first met him, I'm like, oh my God, that's the Terminator. Like, I couldn't listen to any of the words he was saying. I was just like, that's the Terminator. He's just such an iconic, I think.
Oh yeah.
So I sat in that meeting and I remember he left and I was thinking about how do we market California using Arnold? And so I raised my hand and I was pretty new and I said, he's the third most recognizable human being on the planet. Like we should use him to market the state of California. And one of the staffers goes, don't ever let him hear you say that. And I was like, oh, am I wrong? They said, he thinks he's the most recognizable. I was like, okay, got it. But I was in Germany with him and we were opening this big trade show in Hanover, Germany, and we were the partner country. So typically this big trade show picks a partner country, but California was so big, it was considered a country. And it was the heads of state usually open the trade show. They walk around, they open the trade show. And they look at booths and they shake hands. And it was Angela Merkel at the time. So They pop a cork on a big bottle of champagne and then they start down this pathway. And we were in the bubble walking down the pathway, but all the staffers knew that Arnold typically never sticks to the plan that we tell him to. He doesn't stick to the talking points and stick to the plan. So we're walking with this big group of people, big security bubble. And sure enough, he sees something down an aisle and he pulls up the red rope and he goes down the aisle to see it. And it was like a technology trade show. So he saw something cool, a shiny thing.
Shiny object.
And so then the scrum ensues. Like he did this in Beijing, he did this in other places. So a big scrum of people and people they're trying to grab his suit and they're trying to grab his hair and it's just this craziness. And so I was on my BlackBerry at the time. Yeah, sad. I just saw that movie about BlackBerry. If you haven't seen it. It's actually very interesting. So I pull myself out of the scrum and I figure I'm just going to check my emails until the thing starts moving again. And on my peripheral vision on my left, I could see there was another person doing the exact same thing. And I turned my head and it was Angela Merkel.
Really?
So the most powerful woman in the world was sitting there kind of annoyed, waiting for no one was paying attention to her. It was the Governator was what people were so fascinated with. But anyway, that whole celebrity thing and what was interesting about that job is when we traveled, we met with heads of states. We weren't meeting with the commerce secretaries or the top economic person because he's Arnold and because it was California and the economy was so huge. We got to, it was like traveling with a global leader as well. So it was very, very interesting.
One comment or line you said, I want to go down a derivative. How much of economic development is marketing and storytelling?
Yeah, good. Oh, I would say most of it is.
Most of it?
Because, every city has an airport. Every city has universities. Every city can claim to have great neighborhoods. Every city can say they have, transit systems to move people around, right? Like those are staples. Everybody has those things. But it's how you're telling the story. And in fact, I've said this, since I came to Georgia in 2011, but I've said it before, Georgia's really good at that. So the state of Georgia is really good at that. And economic developers in Georgia are really good at telling a story. Whereas I think in California, we weren't as good at it.
Right.
And I think that might be because, California's economy is just booming. We never really had to fight for anything. Mm-hmm. We were never the Rust Belt. We never, California just continues to grow. Even today, its GDP continues to grow despite the fact that it's regulated and they got problems and whatnot.
Post-COVID. And
it still grows. And so I think other states like Georgia and Midwestern states they had to scrap and fight to get those wins, those companies to move. And so they got really good at it. So Georgia tells this amazing story. I think it's, and I love telling it. And I can sell Georgia and Atlanta probably better than anybody. But it's Southern hospitality. It's business friendly. It's a beautiful place to live. Like you and I talked about earlier, we have the busiest airport in the world, so you can get anywhere direct. Yep. Like we have great universities. We have diversity. We have all the really great things that I think, are part of that storytelling.
Sure. From the Governator, you go for 3 years in the Obama administration. Walk us through just some of those learnings, things that transpired.
Yeah, so that was an interesting transition too, because I was working for a Republican governor, although a California Republican. But and there was this candidate, Barack Obama, that I honestly didn't support. I didn't raise any money for, but he was interesting to me. And I remember I was in Sacramento. I wasn't living in Sacramento. I was living in Southern California, but I commute almost every other day. I was in Sacramento. And I went to my hotel during the President Obama's inaugural speech, because I thought this was obviously historic presidency. I watched him give a speech, and he said something, and I have to go back and look it up, but it was something along the lines of, do you want your kids growing up in a world where China's number one and America's number 2 or 3? And that really kind of got me to go, oh my God, no. I'm a patriotic American. I'm proud to be an American. And I was like, no, I don't want that to happen. And so I went back to my office, and interestingly enough, Eloisa Clementich from Invest Atlanta was working for me at the time. So Eloisa and I go way back.
Yeah.
And I walked into her office and I said, I want a job in the Obama administration. Like, how do you do that? I have no idea. And she pulled out a piece of paper and she started doing like these, who we know that might know somebody that's in the Obama orbit, Long story short, it worked. I got to somebody, and 6 months later, I get a call saying, "Would you fly
economic
to
development prospect?"
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. Yeah, I always thought that we got to kiss a lot of frogs. I kissed a lot of frogs, and one of them worked. Somebody got me, through White House PPO, and I got a call saying, "Can you be in Washington D.C. next week to meet with the Secretary of Commerce nominee?" And so I flew to Washington D.C. I did that. His name was Gary Locke. Gary Locke was the former governor of the state of Washington, and super interesting guy. Interviewed, and then months later,
got the job as Deputy Assistant Secretary of the U.S. Economic Development Administration.
Yes.
So ended up there, and that was like, I was like a kid in a candy store.
Exciting times.
Yeah, it was exciting times. We were coming out of a deep recession. It was scary, but it was like, everybody there would run through a wall for the American people. Like, the people I was working with were just the most amazing people, that we were working 24/7. We were doing everything we could, everything we needed to do. And it was just fascinating to be there. And I, as a government guy at that point in my life, like, to me, that was like it. Like, I was like, I'm going in and out of the White House. I'm in the Secretary of Commerce's office, and it was really amazing experience. But then I had another cool opportunity. I think I was on the job maybe 8 or 9 months, and I get a call from the Secretary's office saying, the Secretary of Commerce wants to meet with you, which scared the hell out of me at first. I'm like, did I do something wrong? It's a little scary. And I met with him, and he said, "Hey, Brian, the White House." So the BP oil spill had happened.
Yes.
And Secretary of Commerce says that the White House had set up a national incident command to respond to the BP oil spill. And within the National Incident Command, they set up different teams. So there's like an ecological restoration working group, and there was several working groups. And they said, we want you to run the economic solutions group within the National Incident Command. And I remember I said, "Oh yeah, that sounds interesting. Like, what
Tell me
is
more
that?"
about it?
Yeah. And he's like, "I have no idea, but I need to know by the end of the day." So I was like, "Okay, I'll do it." I had no idea what I was getting into. And I think that was like a Tuesday. And the next day I get an agenda. And the following Friday, every Friday there was a meeting in the Situation Room, and I get the agenda, and I'm on the agenda to present in the Situation Room on Friday, 2-3 days after I was
said yes.
I said yes. I had no idea what I was doing. But it was an amazing experience.
Yeah.
I got to really work. I think the thing about that was I oversaw a big intergovernmental response. So I had the ability to reach into, any department. I could call the Homeland Security Secretary, the Interior Secretary, the Secretary of the Navy if I needed anything.
Right.
And everybody responded immediately.
Right.
So it was just a really amazing experience. Stressful,
We worked 24/7.
Yes.
But
that BPO
got it done.
that was a year and a half, 2-year cleanup.
It was. I mean, just to stop the well from gushing
Right.
was, I think 6 months, and then and then my job was really mitigating the impact of the oil spill for the people along the Gulf, from Galveston, Texas to Bay County, Florida. Businesses were shut. The oil industry was shut down. The fishing industries were shut down, and it was like, how can we get them whole, make them whole, and then how can we get things open and operating again as quickly as possible? So it was great, amazing experience.
And that lasted to about 2010, 2011.
Yeah.
Then comes Invest Atlanta.
Atlanta comes into my life. It was, I can't, I'm trying to recall the story exactly, but I think I came home, we were living in an apartment, and, I told you I have 5 kids.
Yes.
And I walk in and my wife looked really upset, and on the coffee table there was covered with bills, and she's sitting underneath the coffee table, and I look at her and I said, "What's going on?" And she goes, "We have to decide which car payment not to make this month, because those jobs don't pay a lot,
right?
And Washington, D.C. is an expensive place to live." And I remember thinking, all right, party's over. I was having a blast. It was great. I was meeting the most incredible people and flying around the country doing the coolest stuff. But it was like, okay, it's time to go get a quote unquote real job. Yeah. So I started letting people know that I was looking, and somebody in the White House said, Atlanta just hired a new, young, up and coming mayor. We think he's going to be a superstar, and his name was Kasim Reed.
Yep.
And they said he's looking for someone to run his economic development agency, which was called the Atlanta Development Authority at the time. And that's an opportunity for you. So looked into it. My sister-in-law lives here, so my wife was like, that would be great. And so I threw a resume in, and I ended up, getting the job. So.
This podcast is brought to you by Atlanta Ventures. Check out our website to access many resources, including free tools and guides to start a business, a calendar of our upcoming events hosted at Atlanta Tech Village, and a lot more content around building companies. You came to Atlanta at a time that, this is years before Pond City Market, right? It was it was a very good time to get into the city and dive headfirst into all the things that are and were going on. So I want to talk a lot about the transition you saw in your time at Invest Atlanta, and then you went to the Metro Atlanta Chamber. That's a very, very booming time in the city.
Yeah, I think 2011 was definitely an interesting time economically in the city. We were coming out of the recession. Atlanta had all the right bones to really be bigger than it was economically. It was already big, but it took particular hits during the recession. If you remember, it kind of hit Atlanta pretty hard.
Yeah, real estate.
Phones weren't ringing. I remember, initially, no companies were calling wanting tours to look for space in 2011. The phones weren't ringing. And when I got to Invest Atlanta, the other kind of shocker for me was that, and it was the Atlanta Development Authority. I renamed it to Invest Atlanta, and I'll tell you why. But it was actually insolvent when I got there in 2011. It was in big trouble.
Right.
It had taken some loans to do some housing projects, and then the economy crashed, and the loans were due, and there was no money to pay them. And I was a bit shocked, because I had left my cool job in the Obama administration, and I inherited an entity that was bankrupt, And there was also cultural issues with the entity, and people around town seemed to have lost faith in its ability to execute. But I remember, I think within the first 3 months, I had to go in front of the city council and ask for, I don't know if it was $3 million, but I basically stood in front of the city council. I said, just got here. You don't know me. I don't know you. I don't have a plan yet. But if you don't give me $3 million, I'm going to have to lay off half the staff. Like that's it. And there's no. I'm not going to sugarcoat it for you. These are the facts. And after some discussion, they agreed. They said, okay, we'll do that. And that literally saved the Atlanta Development Authority. It would have been in big trouble. Remember, the Beltline comes under Invest Atlanta. So the Beltline is a sub-entity. And it was, the Beltline was very small at the time. So anyway.
Yeah, it was still
in 2011, the East Side Trail didn't exist. It was just starting,
Yes.
And so I got the money, and the long story short, there was we ended up fixing it, and I renamed it Invest Atlanta for a couple of reasons. Everybody called it the ADA, the Atlanta Development Authority, and in my mind, that's like Americans with Disability Act, American Dental Association, Assistant District Attorney, and also Authority, Atlanta Development Authority. To me, wasn't a very friendly welcome to Atlanta, Mr. Business Owner, and So I said, let's change the name. We changed the name, changed the logo.
Great idea.
We were above the underground. And I remember looking out my window one day. I was on a call and I saw somebody get shot and killed right out my window. And then I called Mayor Reed the next day. I said, we got to move. I can't build a globally competitive economic development organization from this location. It's just not going to work. So we moved to the Georgia Pacific building, and so the idea was like, let's reinvigorate it. People were, the staff was seemingly beat down. They didn't have pride in the organization.
So it was an underground, and now
now it's at Georgia Pacific.
Yeah, so it's not that far as the crow flies, but it's.
But it presented different. Like, GP Building's a big corporate building. Above the underground was not a great place to have investors show up and want to be
I want to
there.
get to downtown and
I want to talk about downtown too. Lots of opinions on downtown and Centennial Yards, obviously. But so anyway, we fixed it and we made it work, and that was great. And then I felt like that was the job. And then I went to the Metro Atlanta Chamber because I had been in government my entire career at that point, and I felt like I really wanted to get in the private sector, like we talked about earlier. I wanted to be one of these people that went back and forth from the private sector to the government. I like that, and I felt like that was
it's very cool,
useful to have that piece, somebody with that kind of perspective. Like I was the government guy sitting on the other side of the table. I was the private sector guy dealing with the government person. So I went to the chamber, which was great, interesting. And the chamber's a great entity. Yeah.
And then Beltline, and then Seattle got recruited to go to Seattle.
Yeah.
And then the Centennial Yards opportunity. Positioned itself. You've been there for about 2.5 years.
Yeah, that's right.
Why? What piqued your interest about Centennial Yards? And let's start with that first.
Yeah, so I had, when I left Atlanta, my plan was always to come back. There was no question about it. I'm a non-resident fellow at the Brookings Institute, and we study the competitiveness of cities, and I'm kind of a nerd about that, like what makes cities more competitive than others. And Seattle was always an outlier in all of the rankings and all the economic data. It grows really fast growing, as we talked about.
Feels like
$1 trillion of companies businesses there. It's just it's like what's in the water there,
right? Seriously.
And so I wanted to go. I was like, I had a cool opportunity because the former governor of the state of Washington was the Secretary of Commerce, and then there was another governor who I knew that they were saying, come and do it for a couple of years. They actually said, give us 3 years. They said, come and kind of, they didn't have a regional economic development organization.
Right.
So my job was to go there and create it. So that was fascinating. And then I was back and forth to Atlanta, told all my friends in Atlanta that for the right opportunity, I'll come back, like keep an eye out. And people would say, like what? And I'm like, I don't know, just And then sure enough, 3 years later, I get a call from a friend. His name is KP Reddy.
Yeah.
And you know KP.
I do, yeah.
And KP was doing some consulting work for CIM Group, which owns Centennial Yards. And he calls me one day and says, Brian, I was on a call with the CIM guys today, and they were asking me questions that I couldn't answer. And I told them they should talk to an economic developer and they should talk to you. So I was like, happy to jump on a call and answer questions, So I jumped on a call, answered a whole bunch of questions. And then I happened to be in Atlanta 3 weeks later. My niece was getting married. I came down, met with them again. At the end of a long meeting, one of the guys says, "You're probably wondering what this is about." And I was like looking at my watch thinking, yeah, I am. I mean, I love this conversation, but I got to go. And they said, we're looking for a president of Centennial Yards company. And I paused, and the pause was in my head. Oh, I can help you find somebody to do that job. And then they said, is that something you'd be interested in? And my answer was, oh, hell yeah, definitely.
Mm-hmm. And this is what, 19?
No.
Pre-pandemic?
Was it 1920? I think it was 20.
Okay.
Yeah. But what fascinated me about it is, number one, it is truly transformational, right? So This is a $5 billion, 8 million square feet project.
8 million square feet.
Enormous. In the heart of downtown, which is the heart of the entire region, which you could argue is the heart of the Southeast United States, right? And it's so big and complicated. We're building a city within a city, right? So this isn't like, hey, Brian, come to Atlanta and build a couple of buildings in Midtown.
Yeah.
It's...
This is where the Gulch is right now.
Yes, this is where the Gulch is right now. Exactly.
Right across from the arena and
where people tailgate before games. Right, that's its reputation. The CNN deck, the big giant parking deck. It's actually where Atlanta was founded.
Right,
Atlanta was founded right there because all the tracks crossed, and the original name of the city was Terminus. It was because of that site. So all of that made me think, wow, this is interesting, because it would probably use all of my skill sets of community engagement and economic.
You can see that career arc kind of formulating here.
Yeah, it almost felt like, in a way, like this could be a capstone project or something for my career.
Well said.
And so, it had funding. It had, Tony Ressler and Richard Ressler and CIM, and there's a whole bunch of celebrity investors involved.
Yes.
So it was sexy. It was interesting.
And so walk us through the investors, how that came
how
together.
That happened. Yeah, it's a good question.
8 million square feet.
We're entitled. We could build 12 million square feet if we wanted to, but our goal is 8 million. Yeah.
Before we get to the investors, so 8 million. I mean, what does it look like? I saw what was on the website, but
yeah, I mean, it's a mixed use sports adjacent entertainment district.
Okay.
So imagine, great food and beverage and bars and restaurants. We're going to build 4,000 apartments. So wow. A lot of new people living downtown. 4,000 apartments is like 7,000 new people.
Yep.
There'll be office. We have an office building designed, although office is slow right now, but we're going to build office.
Retail's hot.
Retail's hot. Hospitality's hot. We're going to build hotels. We have 2 buildings under construction right now. For everybody who asks me all the time, when are you going to get started? We already got started. It's underway. We opened an apartment building. It's fully occupied. We rebuilt the Nelson Street Bridge. It's now called the Steel Bridge, and it's really cool. If you haven't seen it, go down, check it out. And next time you're downtown, look in the Gulch. You'll see 2 construction cranes swinging right now. It's probably 140 people on the job site today. People, interestingly enough, in the last couple of weeks, I've been asked, are you guys slowing down? And the answer is no. The only thing that's slowing us down is concrete has to dry. So you got to let it dry before you move to the next thing. But everything is moving forward as fast as we possibly can. And we're really, really excited about that.
And so the investors include Tony Ressler, co-owner of the Hawks.
Yeah, so I always start with the origin story. So the origin story, and Steve Coonan, the president of the Hawks, tells the story way better than I can.
He's a good storyteller.
He's a great. I won't even pretend to be able to compete with that level of storytelling. But he said, I was in the arena with Tony when he made the decision to buy the Hawks, and he says we walked out of the arena up to the curb in front of the arena, so he could get in his SUV to take him back to his plane. And he says he steps up on the running board of the SUV and he looks over the top, the roof of the car into the hole in the ground, and he turns to Steve and he says, "What's that?" And Steve says, Steve admits it wasn't a great answer. He goes, "I told him it was the Gulch." And Tony, being from LA, says, "What's a gulch?" And Steve says, well, that's where people tailgate. It's
the
like,
truth.
Yeah. And then Tony says, I want LA Live there, right? So I don't know how many people are familiar with LA Live. I lived in Southern California for a long time, but LA Live was really one of the first large sports adjacent entertainment districts in America.
Yes.
So that it was back in the late 90s, early 2000s. It's around the convention center and Staples Arena. It was just parking lots. And developer bought the land, and they built this. There's a theater and restaurants, and it was a model. I think that a lot of other sports teams around America then started emulating it. Culminating in the Battery, right?
Right. I was going to say what. We know this model works in Atlanta because the Battery.
Yeah, absolutely. It's doing great. It's fantastic, right? And our downtown is not great. And in part, it's because we have a 50-acre hole in the heart of our downtown, right? Number one. And number two, there's nobody living downtown. Right?
Nobody living downtown.
I mentioned we're going to build 4,000 apartments. And I think the way you revitalize and fix a downtown, any downtown that's in the state that ours is in, is get more people living there, walking their dogs, eating at coffee shops. That's what happens to downtown. You get more people living, it revitalizes it.
And you've seen what the Feldman Group has done.
Yeah.
That's where it's the German investors sold recently to a local.
They didn't sell.
Yeah,
they're in negotiation. It's not done yet. Yeah.
Okay.
And we're keeping our fingers crossed. We want it to work. We're praying it works. But just to finish the origin story. So Tony, I make up the rest of the story myself. Tony goes back to
after he says, we want LA Live.
After he says, I want LA Live there. He goes back to his plane. He calls his brother Richard Ressler, and Richard Ressler is the chairman and one of the founders of CIM Group. And CIM Group is also a Los Angeles-based company, big real estate company, developer, $50 billion of assets under management all across the United States, from New York to Miami to Chicago to all over. And it happens to be a company that has the financial wherewithal to take on such an enormous, complicated project and the appetite for that sort of risk.
Yep.
And so Tony is part of the investment, approximately 30% of the investment, and CIM is the rest.
Wow.
And so that's how it all kind of got started.
Wow.
Yeah.
And the last 18, 24 months, economically have shifted from the go-go heyday. We've seen it at Atlanta Ventures.
Yeah.
How has it affected the project or any timelines? You gave us a little update on just, hammers are swinging and concrete's being poured, but.
So we are full steam ahead primarily because we're equity financed, right? So we didn't borrow money. So I think like Newport and any company that borrowed money to build something and interest rates started going up, that's
the
tough.
clock is
The biggest thing for us over the last 24 months, well, two things. One is the office market changed. So we had a Class A office building designed, ready to go. I had pitched every major tech company you can think of, has been through my office. They were interested. And then everybody hit pause. Not stop, they hit pause. And we're still in communications with all of them. And we're continuing to market our office product that we'll build throughout the project. But until we have a big tenant, we're not going to build that building, but we're actively marketing it, right? That shouldn't be a surprise to anybody. In the meantime, we pivoted towards residential and hospitality and F&B, everything else that we were going to build anyway. And so we're full steam ahead. Nothing really changed for us. Even inflation. So, the two buildings we have under construction, one is 300 apartments and the other is a hotel, 300-room hotel, which CIM will own and operate. So we're going to flag it because we own hotels. We have a hospitality division. We own hotels around the country, Los Angeles, Las Vegas, New York, a couple of other places. Those buildings are under construction because we felt strongly over the last 8 months that inflation was leveling out. Now, leveling out at a higher rate,
right?
But more predictable, and that assumption is held true. We also noticed that supply chains were catching up, and subcontractors were more willing to negotiate, you know, as other things were drying up. So we are self-performing. So typically an owner will hire a GC to build the buildings. We're building our own buildings.
Wow.
Those two buildings are us. And that helps us control costs a little bit better when margins are tighter. But, you know, I just want people to understand, like, it was a Herculean effort to get those two constructions in the air in the current economic environment. There was a few reasons why that was important. We wanted Atlantans to know that we're serious, like this is going to happen no matter what. We're going to do this. And that helps market the project for other users, you know. So, you know, will we make less on those buildings? Yeah, we'll make less on those buildings, but it should like spur the construction and more leads coming in and other people wanting to be around that kind of activity in downtown.
How valuable is Centennial Yards being, you know, whether it's 50%, 70%, 80% before the World Cup comes in 2026?
Oh, yeah, that's a great question. So we are using that as you can imagine, I'm using that as a deadline. It's a great deadline.
Right,
And so we are pushing really hard. So I would say, I've been saying at least a third of it will be complete by World Cup, a third of the 50 acres, which is a lot, you know, like, and we have plans on, you know, 2 new sections that we'll be making some announcements on soon.
Okay.
But there's a good possibility we could have those done by World Cup too.
You know, I feel like the market is just very ripe for this because you have the recurring events, whether it's, you know, Falcons, whether it's Hawks, whether it's all the other stuff that happens at State Farm, you know?
Yeah. And you think about downtown now, if you come down for a concert or a game, everybody shows up at the same time, right? Because there's nothing to do before.
Nothing.
And then everybody leaves at the same time because there's nothing to do after. So the Battery, I don't know about you, but I've been to the Battery a couple of times where there was a game going on, but I didn't go to the game.
Yeah.
I sat out at a restaurant, you know, and I could hear the crack of the bat.
Yep.
You know, and enjoy that experience too. And or I'd go early for a concert and, you know, pregame, then go to the concert, you know. So I that will happen. Of course, people will come down because right now there's really no place to go downtown to have a beer, you know.
Yeah.
And so this will definitely change that. But I also think it'll have the effect of making it easier to get in and out of downtown because everyone's not going to be showing up at the same time and leaving at the same time.
I was talking with some friends in Philadelphia and they said, you know, you've got Citizens Bank Park, you've got, you know, the Sink where the Eagles play.
Yeah.
And I'm like, there's got to be just traffic. It's just got to be crazy coming up and down here. And they're like, no, because people come at 9, they come at 10, they come at 11. And it's really distributed out because they tailgate all day.
Yeah.
And
and I think you'll see that. And, you know, our downtown, you know, our site is literally the center of the entire region's transportation grid. It's like, you know, so we have the Five Points MARTA station just adjacent. So that's where everything crosses. But, you know, there's the 20 just to the south. There's the 75 going north and south. There's North Side Drive.
Yeah, it is.
I think one of the most interesting things about our site is, you know, I was downtown, for example, when Taylor Swift was there. I was at the Janet Jackson concert across the street.
Nice.
But my wife and I were like, should we pack a lunch because it's going to be a while to get out of here, you know? And it wasn't. And part of it was, you know, I think MARTA and everybody kind of scared people into taking MARTA. Like, not scare people, but it just recommended, like, it's a better way to get in and out of downtown. The parking will be tight. So an enormous amount of people took MARTA. There's actually 3 MARTA stops around Centennial Yard. So think about how cool is that? It's like it's the largest transit-oriented development, you know, probably in America right now. You know, so but downtown is designed to have multiple ways out.
Right.
Whereas all parts of our city, like if you live in, you know, Cobb County or East Cobb and you work in Midtown, there's only one way to go home.
Sure.
You know, you got to get on that 75 and go north. Whereas if you're, I don't know about you, but you know, I live up here and I'll be at a Falcons game and sometimes I'll go south to the 20 and I'll just wrap around to get back over here, you know? So, or I'll cut like that night with Janet Jackson. My wife and I just cut directly east on surface streets.
Yes.
And then went up Piedmont.
Yep.
Yeah, but the point is like there's multiple ways to get in and out.
Totally.
And then we're also thinking about ride share. And I think one of the cool things about our site is because it's a hole in the ground. So it's 40 feet down. Because we're going to build the whole thing up to viaduct level, up to the street level.
Yes.
So the way to imagine it is when you build a building, you dig a hole, you fill it with a parking garage, and then you put the building on top.
Right.
That's what we're doing. So what you see as the gulch now will be filled with parking and then buildings at street level going up. So what we want to do, and we're working on this right now, is create a giant rideshare plaza at terra firma level, you know, all the way down at the basement level. So you want to take an Uber, you take an elevator or staircase down, and there'll be a giant Uber lobby, right?
That comes just in and out.
Yeah, that's a big circle, and cars are flying in and out. But there's multiple ways out of the Gulch, Centennial Yards, at that lower level.
Right.
So
y'all are planning for that now.
Yeah, it won't clog the surface streets. So
it's kind of what the airport tried to do, but then you got to walk.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I know that exactly. I was like, oh my God, after a long flight, I don't want to have to do this. But you know, there's a way out of the Gulch that takes you out behind the College Football Hall of Fame, right? Yeah. There's that little. So there's other ways out.
I mean, I'll walk to 5 Points MARTA station, so I don't have to get off the east-west line and then just go to Midtown from the north-south, and walking from what is Centennial Yards or from State Farm is, let's say, 7-minute walk.
Yeah.
You know, and it's way easier than.
So right now when you get off so when you go to games, concerts, you take MARTA.
Yeah.
And you get off at the 5 Points MARTA station.
And just walk.
Which way do you go? Do you get out and go,
I go
north to Marietta, or do you go?
I go west to State Farm, and I basically just walk down right next to the Glen Hotel.
Okay, yeah, that way, and down Marietta. Yeah, right.
Really easy. Really easy.
We're working on building a connection, so you'll walk out of the MARTA station and you'll walk straight across. So as the crow flies, you'll walk straight.
That's a no-brainer.
Yeah. Wouldn't that be fantastic? And then we talk about World Cup, and we talk about the downtown, the condition of downtown. And I've been pretty vocal about, we're going to have 8 games.
Yep.
Maybe more. Because I don't know if you've seen like Los Angeles and San Francisco are saying, maybe we don't want this.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Okay. I know we have the World Cup. I don't know what games we have.
Yeah, they haven't announced it yet, but there's going to be 8 games. So 8 games, think about that. That's 16 countries. So people from 16 countries will be here for this period of time. So it's another Olympic-sized moment. But I don't think we're having Olympic-sized conversations about what are we doing to prepare our downtown for this.
Yeah.
You know, and I think we have to get. I know the mayor's thinking about this. I know the mayor's office is thinking about this. I know the Metro Atlanta Chamber and the Sports Council and Dan Corso. I know they're all thinking about it, but it's like there's
it's coming.
I want to hear more urgency. Personally, we understand that internally at Centennial Yards and CIM, and I told you we're using it as a deadline. And everybody, matter of fact, I just had a senior staff meeting yesterday. I told everybody the word of the day is act with urgency. We need to everything we need to. We're not acting with enough urgency. We need to go. Like it's less than 3 years from now. We're going to have 16 countries here, and this is our opportunity to show the world like how cool we are, right?
Let's tie it also. So downtown, there's so many different facets, right? I feel like you've got Centennial Yards, you've got the Benz, you've got State Farm, you've got South Downtown, which is going through
the Georgia World Congress Center.
Georgia World Congress Center.
Yeah.
And then you've also got Underground. What do we do about Underground?
Right. It's a good question. I mean, there's a new owner, as you know. His name is Shanil Lalani. I like Shanil a lot. He and I just had lunch recently. He's got great plans. He's got a good
MJQ's
vision.
there, so that's going to be,
He's got a great vision. I know that he will make Underground presentable and a place where World Cup people, when they're here, visitors will want to go. I know that. He's been doing really cool activations. I'm very confident that he's going to spend the money and the time and the resources to make sure that it looks good, right?
Yep.
And then you have the 5 Points MARTA station. And I have great, very close friends at MARTA who have assured me that it will look good too. It's not going to be redone, a brand new station, but it's going to look not anything like it does today. They're going to clean it up and make it look great. There's a Midtown station they're going to fix. They're going to do more, run more buses. We're talking about, on Auburn where the streetcar runs, getting the streetcar out of traffic, all for World Cup. And I know people go, why are we doing all this for the World Cup? Like, it's for 1 month. Anything that causes you to fix things is a good thing, right? So like, I don't know about you, but if you've ever put your house on the market, you paint it and you fix it, and then maybe you don't sell it, but you don't regret the fact that you painted it and fixed it, right?
Right.
So I kind of see it as let's resurface the streets. Let's put in new lighting. Let's paint the intersection. So the intersection of Centennial Olympic Park Drive and Marietta, where everybody here, we've all been there, but if you go into anything, put a big mural there and light it up with now
it's in Margaritaville right there, right?
Different color lights, and make it there's not expensive, hugely capital intensive things you can do it's like painting the house that you're trying to sell. So resurface the streets, put in more lighting, put in a public PA system, trim the trees, power wash the sidewalks.
Yeah, and just tighten up.
Yeah, not rocket science. Just get it done.
I did go on the Ferris wheel the other day with my...
You did? I'd never been on the Ferris wheel.
Neither. It was my
funny.
My 5-year-old daughter had a day off, and I was like, what are we going to do? I'm like, we're going on the Ferris wheel.
That's awesome.
It was great.
But it's right out my window, and it's fascinating to me because that Ferris wheel does very well.
Right?
Yes. I used to know the numbers,
cheap.
But I was surprised that even with Margaritaville, that kind of blocks a little bit of the view on the side. But anyway.
So what does the success of Centennial Yards look like? Is it 5 years from now, 7 years from now?
Yeah, that's a good question. It depends on who you ask. If you ask my boss or you ask my development people, but our goal is by the end of 2028, it's either complete or all of it is either complete or under construction. Yeah. So by 2028, the cake will be baked.
Yep.
So you can think of that's a scary deadline. I wake up in the middle of the night in cold sweats sometimes about oh my goodness, we have so much we need to do in order to make that happen. But that is the horizon. And my vision for it at the end of the day is, this is a location where everybody who comes to visit Atlanta, the region, will go. Yep. Everyone's going to go here. So it's kind of like Times Square. You go to New York City, you got to go to Times Square and take your Instagrammable picture, post on social media. I was in New York. Centennial Yards will be that, I think. But what's important to me personally is that it needs to be unique to Atlanta culture, right? So if we build a project where you're sitting at an intersection and you're looking at a Starbucks on one corner and a Fuddruckers on the other, we failed. Like if you're not sitting there going, I can see, feel, hear Atlanta culture, music, art, food. Like if you don't get a uniquely Atlanta experience, if you're sitting in the middle of that thinking I could be in any city in America, that's a failure. So it's got to feel special and unique to Atlanta. It's like one of the things I love, and I've been talking, I have a new friend named Dallas Austin. I don't know if you know Dallas.
Yeah, of course.
Fantastic human being. And,
music producer.
Yeah, music. And, I think,
designer. Yeah.
One thing Georgia does really well that I don't think the world knows enough about is music.
Yeah.
Like, forget Tennessee, I think we're better. And we have all kinds of music. And, if you look at the genealogy and the history of music in this state, it's unbelievable. Yep. And it's a story that hasn't been told. So how do we build that into Centennial Yards where there's live music spilling onto the streets? Ooh. Where you park your car and you can just kind of bar hop and experience Atlanta music, or even, Dallas is talking about a museum, an interactive museum where you can go in and make music. Like there's got to be some kind of a musical component, and then I also think it's an opportunity to tell the world who we are. Like I know there's already a walk of fame around the Mercedes-Benz Stadium, but there should be a walk of fame in Centennial Yards, for our civil rights leaders, the actors, musicians,
yep.
Because again, as a Atlantan by choice, twice.
Yeah.
And having been from New York and California, I love telling my friends around the country. Yeah. Some people go, "Why do you live in Georgia?" I'm like, "Oh, you know nothing. Mm-hmm. Let me tell you about Georgia." Yeah. And after I'm done, they're like, "Oh my God, I never knew that. I never knew that many Fortune 500 companies. I never knew that many musicians from James Brown to TLC to
Otis
on
Redding,
and on, all across the board, come from Georgia, right?"
Yeah.
Like think about how cool that would be if when people come to Centennial Yards, they walk away going, "Man, this place is amazing. Yep. Like I want to move here. I want to invest here."
Yep.
That's my goal.
Well, we always end the conversations. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, of course. This was fun.
Before we get to the last question, I do want to, so what is you mentioned the capstone, this is the capstone.
Yeah.
Is there you've got 5 kids, what is the post-Centennial Yards world look like for you? Or is it not even possible to imagine it yet?
I would say it's not even possible. I don't have time.
Yeah.
What I can tell you is it will be here. I mean, Atlanta is home, primarily because I think my wife will leave me if I move again. No, I just
you all been on some adventures.
I mean, seriously.
Yeah.
No, who knows what, I could see myself getting back into a public sector job at some point. Yeah. I just have that public service I think is inherent in me,
Yeah, clearly.
But this is so enormous. And like I said, I think the word transformational or transformation is overused.
Yeah.
This literally, like you can't deny that this is transformational. It's going to change everything.
This is a gravitational force for downtown. Yeah. That has not happened.
Which is important for the entire city. One of the things I love about Atlanta is we have different product offerings, if you will. Right? Yeah. So you have Buckhead, and that works for some people, and then you have Midtown, and that works for some people, not all people. Then you have the East Side Trail, then you have the West Side Trail. And then our downtown is the thing that's not there yet. We can't really offer that product yet. And so this is going to give all of us another thing to brag about. Like we all need all of these products to be successful. Yeah. Not one of them or not 2 of them. Like if all of them are successful, it's like not firing on all cylinders. Yeah. Or leaving a best player on the bench. Like why would you do that? Let's get all of our best players on the field. Let's fire on all cylinders. And this is going to allow us to do that. So on top of the busiest airport in the world and the Beltline and the fantastic work that we've seen in Midtown over the last 10 years, it's just, that's a remarkable story. Yep. How wonderful Buckhead is. Like what an amazing story we're going to have to tell when we have all the pieces knitted together. Well, that leads into our last question, why Atlanta and what has Atlanta done for you? I feel like you've already answered it, but yeah. So, Atlanta's such an interesting place, and I can say this because I've lived in different places. And you and I were talking a little bit earlier about Seattle. And Seattle's fantastic, and I'm not going to say anything bad about it, but it doesn't have the same aspirational spirit as Atlanta, and it also doesn't have the public sector and private sector working closely together to make it a better place and to take on and try to challenge and solve big problems. You don't see that there, Like I also love the fact that Atlanta, being the father of 5 sons, is a place that's still trying to invent it, still trying to figure out what it wants to be. Yeah. So if you're a young person and you're in New York or LA or wherever, really hard to be a part of kind of creating its future. Not possible, but it's unlikely, Whereas Atlanta, as you know, and you've been embraced by Atlanta and, public and private sector and Fortune 500s and whatnot. Oh yeah. That's what's beautiful about this place is that you can get access to Ed Bastian or Dan Cathy. Like these people it's amazing to me actually how or our mayor or our city council people, they want to hear from you. They want you to be successful. Like Atlanta embraced me and welcomed me, as family. And that was the striking thing for me when I came back to Atlanta after Seattle was, I can't remember what event it was. It was some big event. And it was like a family reunion. Yeah. It was like I couldn't walk 3 feet without getting a real hug from somebody. Not a I need something from you at some point hug. It was like it felt like aunts and uncles and cousins and sisters and brothers. It's a very special city because of that. Yeah. And then, the last thing for me on Atlanta that I think we have that is our secret superpower is our Black culture and our Black talent. I mean, this is why Microsoft, bought that property here. This is why big tech companies are moving here. This is why entrepreneurs are coming here to start businesses because there's no city in America that has that Black culture the way we have it. You know? And I love that about the city. It's one of the things I obviously missed when I was in Seattle because it's not there. But this is a very special place because of all of those things.
Brian McGowan, thank you so much. Yeah. Thank you so much for being part of the Atlanta Story
Podcast. Was what I knew this would be, John. Good seeing you.
Good seeing you. This podcast is brought to you by Atlanta Ventures. It was co-produced by JC Cadet and Jon Birdsong. If you are looking to start the next $300 million business in Atlanta, check out the studio at atlantaventures.com and the companies we work with who've done it before. Thank you for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed it, please share it at your next coffee meeting or dinner greeting, rate it, and write a benevolent, eloquent review.